I think the thing is, too, people are depending on you, not just your manager, the IA firm, the carrier, but that policyholder is depending on you to get them back to where they were prior to that loss. So that's something it's a heavy weight to carry sometimes, but it's a burden that you should almost welcome, to feel like, hey, I am the person that can get them back to where they need to be. I can get them through this difficult time and get, them back to square one, to where they were before that loss. Welcome back, everybody, to Season 2 of the New Adjuster Podcast. This is Episode 5, and we are super thankful that you're joining us today. As always, my name is Murphy. I'm the Property Training Manager here at CNC, and with me is...
Kelsey, Property Claims Manager.
Thanks, Kelsey, as well, for joining us. We are super excited, obviously, to have you back with us. Again, Episode 5, we have had great content up until this point, even dating back to Season 1. If you've missed any of that, obviously, go back and give it a watch or a listen wherever you get your podcast. But today, we dive into an introduction to auto adjusting. So I know we are very excited about this subject, correct?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so we are really thankful that you're here, ready to dive in. So let's go ahead and welcome our very special guest today, Mr. Joel Reynolds. So Joel, thanks for being here. Give us a little kind of an update on what you're doing, where you've been, how long have you been doing it, those types of things.
Okay, well, yeah, like you said, my name is Joel. It's a pleasure to be here, for one, but I've been working for CNC doing independent adjusting for about 8 years now. Started in auto, and I've worked auto several times since. I'm actually a trainer, / manager here at CNC when it comes to, auto and working it from day to day and doing what needs to be done.
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome.
So what can you start by explaining what an independent adjuster is and what their role in the automobile industry is?
Well, an independent adjuster is someone who's gotten their license through their state, basically to work for insurance companies on various claims. Now that can range from auto all the way to crop, but obviously today we're talking about auto.
Yeah.
So generally what happens if insurance companies in general have a overflow of claims just due to, a lot of accidents, or maybe a hailstorm come over through, or maybe a flood, something along those lines. A whole bunch of cars get messed up at all at once. Well, that's when they call independent adjusters in and go, hey, look, we got a lot of work to do in a short time to do it.
Right.
We need to get this done. So that's essentially what we're there for. Is we're just, hired hands to get everything moving as fast and quick as possible with as much efficiency.
Yeah. All right. So when most people think about auto adjusting too, they think about, hailstorms, hurricanes, floods like that. But the auto claims aren't specific to those types of losses, right? Can't you deal with like collision and things like that? You can do all of it really as an auto adjuster with that independent license.
That's true. Absolutely. Yeah. I've worked, I've worked arsons. I've worked, let's see here, people hitting deer. People just driving into ditches. Like that happens way more often than anything.
One-car accidents, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Stuff like that happens all the time. And, we work those from day to day, and, and you could be working like, that arson claim, and then the next call you get is, hey, I hit a deer. And then the next call you get is that I was in a 7-car pileup.
Right.
Now, most of the time you're not going to want that 7-car pileup, but the call's coming in.
Right. So you're not really, I guess, pigeonholed into one type of loss. As an auto adjuster working for any carrier, any firm, you can handle kind of a myriad of different losses there.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Never really thought of an arson claim for auto insurance.
It could happen.
Angry girlfriends,
I can see it. Yeah, that's
right.
Crazy. So what are the key responsibilities as an auto adjuster, as an independent adjuster when it comes to assessing those auto claims? What is your main responsibilities?
Well, first of all, you want to make sure that the customer's, heard when it comes to their claims. I mean, a lot of people, they care about their cars. That's something that you drive every single day.
Oh, yeah.
And you might not think about it all the time. Like, when's the last time you looked at your bumper? Something along those lines.
Sure.
And, they don't think about it until something happens.
Absolutely.
And then it's just like, how am I going to get to work? How am I going to pick up my kids? How am I going to get groceries? And so your main goal whenever one of your main responsibilities is assuring them like, look, I'm here for you. I'm going to get this done for you, and we're going to get this done as quickly as possible. Here's what I need from you, and here's what we'll be doing.
Right.
And then that way they fully understand. And I always one of my things that I always did was I always explained the next 5 steps in the process. Like, this is what you can expect. We're going to get an estimate done. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. And then, just making sure that they understood every step in the process. That way, they are not worrying as much. You
Right.
know, just sitting at home going, what's going on with my car?
Yeah. So you talk about process, and process for every claim is relatively the same, right? But auto is a little bit different in some aspects. So let's take it in terms of an auto field adjuster. Okay, so you're not a desk; you're actually out in the field doing auto claims, whether it's weather, collision, whatever the case may be. Give us kind of an A to Z what you do. Obviously, we know first contact, and from there, kind of take us down the list of steps.
So yeah, like you said, the first contact, you know, setting up an appointment, and whether that's going to be an intent or whether that's, you know, if it's a non-drive, because sometimes vehicles aren't drivable.
Right.
You set up like, hey, I'm going to be here this day, this time. You know, you get there, you kind of, you know, go, hey, you know, introduce yourself to them like we spoke on the phone. Just wanted to, you know, we're going to go over the car. And like one of the things I would like to do is I walk around and I, you know, kind of point stuff out to them and I kind of explain to them what I'm seeing.
Right.
And, you know, and if they have any questions, I answer them on the spot. Typically what I try to do as well is I, you know, let's say there's some odd damage on the car. I'm gonna look at it and go, what is this from?
Right.
Because like, let's say you got a front end damage.
Right.
Well, you know, if you've got a whole bunch of dents on the rear end, I'm gonna immediately go, well,
probably
you know,
not
what is
related.
This? Yeah, what is this from?
Right.
And if they're like, oh, if that's related, okay, how? You know.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not gonna outright say like, no, it's not.
Right.
But
do a little investigative work
exactly.
there. Yeah.
And you know, from there, you know, you used to be able to write checks just right at the place, but I think that most places have stopped doing that.
Yeah.
So essentially, you kind of go, hey, look, I'm going to get an estimate done for you. I tend to undersell, over deliver.
Right.
So I'll tell them like, hey, I'll try to get this done within the next couple of days, and then have it back to them same day.
Yeah.
That way, you know, they're much more happy. Like, this was going to take a lot longer. I'm glad that you could get this done for me.
Yeah, and you kind of set a good precedence there. You've already exceeded those expectations. Yeah.
Right, and then I've also set an expectation if something happens where I can't get that estimate done in that first, you know, day or so.
Sure.
So that way they're like, okay, well, you know, it's only been 2 days. He said it was going to take, you know, about 2 to 3. So we're
so you're giving yourself some leeway there.
Yeah,
I like
absolutely.
That. Undersell, over deliver. I like that.
So you talk about being in the field and doing this face to face with people. Are adjustments that are coming from virtual adjustments, are those more common nowadays, going and doing a virtual adjustment, having them use their phone and take pictures of it?
Absolutely. With the introduction of like, you know, different, you know, devices, having the ability to like stream and you can see what they're looking at. Absolutely. Those that, you know, people are much more able to write better estimates based off of that.
And quicker, would you say?
Yeah, I would say quicker, because you're able to actually talk to the insured, because sometimes when you're on the phone with them, and I would say it also produces more accurate estimates, because when you're on the phone with them, sometimes you can ask them those little questions that they're not thinking about.
Sure.
Like, for instance, my car recently, I ran into a deer. Of course, me being an adjuster, I immediately went to the front of my car and I looked at, you know, A to Z, contacted my insurance company, and I filled out the form, and they're like, well, is there anything you need us to know? And I basically listed out every single thing that was wrong.
Sure.
And I sent it to them. That way they couldn't, you know, later on, well, we never should have. No, I told you.
Nope.
But, you know, like, for instance, my door started creaking. Didn't do that before. It's not a new vehicle, but those doors were not creaking.
Right, yeah.
So, and that's the sort of thing that they don't think about.
Yeah.
Like, is your door creaking and it wasn't before?
Yeah.
And it turns, you know, and I looked at them like, okay, so my fender got pushed back and then it's, you know, kind of hitting the door and making it creak and everything.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's the sort of thing that when you're doing virtual, you can ask them, like, is there anything else that you can think of, like any new noises, any new this, any new that? Can you show me that particular area?
Yeah.
So
I don't work too much or I don't work at all in auto. I do mostly property. Is the process for, say, for your creaking door example, that it happened a month or so after your claim was finished? Is there a supplement process that you can call in and say, hey, this started happening from my wreck, I believe. Is it the same scenario that you call in and?
Well, yeah, I mean, typically they would just reopen the same claim.
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't be a whole new claim, because, I mean, that would just be
Still related.
It's still related. It'd just be a headache to open a new claim. So essentially you just go say, hey, look, this door's creaking now.
Yeah.
Like, I believe it is related to the accident. Generally what the insurance company's going to ask you to do, take it to the shop. And, you know, from there, what they're going to want is the shop confirming, hey, is this, you know, do you think this is related?
Yeah.
And because, you know, you can say all day up and down, like, this is related, this was related. But, you know, if I'm on the other end of that, you know, I'm like, what I always tell people, I trust you, but I need to verify.
Sure.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of people come, I'm not saying you're one of them, but a lot of people come out and they say X, Y, and Z, and it's just doesn't look like it's related to your incident.
Yeah, and I think, too, you get that unbiased opinion from a body shop. They're going to get paid one way or the other based on the
Absolutely.
other damages. Based on their opinion, it's what they do every day. Do you think this could potentially be related to that, like the door creaking to front-end damage and things like that? Okay.
Right.
So now one thing I think about when you think of auto adjusting, and like when I did it back in like 2013, 14, 15, is you mentioned earlier, most people, they look at their car, they've got damage, and they think, how am I going to get to work? So what happens then? Is there a rental that's involved? Is that something a lot of times that the carrier will, basically apply for and get that done for, or is that done separately? Is that a separate claim? How does that whole rental process go into play there?
It depends on what's on their policy.
Okay.
I mean, because most insurance companies, they have a specific rental coverage that you need to ask your agent for.
Right.
And, if you're working a claim, that's something you always have to look for. Do they have rental?
Right.
If they do not have rental coverage, I always just, say to them like, hey, sorry, you don't have any rental.
Just tell them up front.
Right.
Yeah.
And I always follow it up with, if you think that is a mistake, contact your agent's office, because I can't fix that on my
Right.
end. And that way, sometimes because it was getting to a point where some agents' offices just weren't updating the policies.
Oh, yeah.
And so people would call in claims and be like, no, I've been paying for rental for months.
Right.
So, but yes, there is generally what you're going to do is they're going to say, hey, look, I need a rental. And you're going to tell them what their rental coverage is, whether it's, based on days or an amount of money, depending on the, like per day, like let's say it's $50 a day and their maximum is like $2,000, right? So they can get less than that $50 a day and then make it stretch, or they can just do the $50 and run it up as all the way up to that $2,000. But yeah, it just depends on what their rental policy is, and like and generally what you want to do is you want to base it off of what car that they have. So like give them something similar because they might need it.
Yeah. So don't run out and go get like a Porsche if you've got.
I've had people.
I think he was thinking more along the lines of if they've got 3 kids, they need an SUV, right?
Well, yeah, no, that too. But I have had people who like
really.
Well, yeah, they like. I think I got a call from one. I can't remember what the rental place was, but they said, yeah, he's out of coverage. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, how much has he run up so far? It's like $1,700. I'm like, how?
Yeah.
And I literally was like, it's been 4 days. How? And he literally went to like this luxury like rental place, and I think he got like I don't remember if it was a Porsche, what brand car it was.
So did he have a Porsche to begin with? Because I've always wondered that as well. Like, so say I have a higher end SUV. I don't, but say I did.
Right.
Would they be liable for me to remain, not liable, I guess, would insurance typically cover something that is as comfortable? So say it's a nicer,
like a luxury,
bigger,
like a
luxury SUV.
Yeah.
Or do you have to specify that with your agent when purchasing your policy?
I wouldn't say you have to specify it. No, I mean, because whenever you're purchasing your policy, they need to know what the car is anyway.
Right.
So whenever you're, filing a claim for insurance, it's, it's going to pop up like, hey, this year, make, model, right? And then from there, what I typically do is I say, look, you can get the same. I'm going to try to get you the same kind, like get you into a rental that is the same kind, but you can also do a little bit cheaper, and make your rental last in case. In case your repairs take longer than expected, which was a problem for a long time. I was
there. Say with the C word, COVID.
Yeah.
That,
because it caused part shortages
it's everywhere. And if they got to order them, and that can take a while too. Yeah, absolutely. So whenever you are doing auto adjusting, we've talked a lot, again, up until this point, season 1, season 2, about property, flood, stuff like that. So we talk a lot about Xactimate, Symbility, SimSol, things like that. What are the estimating softwares you use in auto? Because I know it is different than, homeowners and flood.
Well, I will say different insurance companies might want you to use a different one.
Sure. Okay.
So getting, I always look at it as it's better to be a jack of all trades versus a master of one.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's a very good point.
Because there's several different. Because each insurance company has a different way of doing things.
Right.
I tell that to insurance too, because they always ask, well, this other insurance company, like, we're not talking about that right now. Like, they have their own way of doing things. We do this way.
Yeah.
But there's Autotex, Mitchell, CCC1.
Okay.
Those are just a few ones that
What are those things?
Estimating programs.
Yeah.
Okay. So like Xactimate?
Yes, exactly. Because like I remember when I did it, we used a lot of Mitchell, and Autotex was kind of newer, I think, at the time. So.
And then it switched. It went from Mitchell to Autotex, and then I think the primary one that a lot of people are using now is CCC1.
Okay, see, I haven't even heard of that one.
Yeah,
Okay, so
it's very I've used it. I've written quite a few estimate supplements on it. It's very intuitive. It helps you out a lot of the time.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Now, is it provided to you by the firm or the carrier to work? Like, you don't have to have your own, do you?
I mean, some might ask you to have your own just because you are an independent adjuster, and some insurance companies, to a degree, are like, well, you're independent,
right?
You might need to provide your own equipment. But other insurance companies, yes, they will provide that to you, as well as some other equipment.
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference between field and desk in auto?
Okay. Well, for instance, in field, typically, you're going to be a one-time trip. Like if it's field, you're typically writing up, an estimate, paying them for it, and then you're pretty much done for that one.
And you go to the next one.
And you go to the next one. If they have any problems, supplements, anything like that, they're going to call back in office, right?
Then it's assigned to a desk adjuster at that point, or
it depends. Some insurance companies don't work with individual adjusters per claim. Some insurance companies, what they do is they just have a whole team. That way, if someone isn't able to answer the phone right away, well, we have this other person right here who can work on this right now.
Gotcha.
And then the
so
files
they're not claim owners.
Right, that's what I was going to say. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay. Gotcha.
There's not a lot of claim ownership in auto unless you're working with really hard cases where like maybe a shop is a really dishonest shop, or maybe an insured is has been investigated several times for the big F word.
Go ahead and say what that is.
Fraud.
There you go. So I just want to put that out
there. You have no idea how many times I've been in an office and I've gone to say that word, and they're like, no.
Don't say it.
We do not say the big F word.
Yeah.
No. Well, it's scary. Yeah. I mean, but we have to realize that's a reality in our line of business, is that happens, and it's scary, but it does.
Oh yeah, another reason you might see people who actually have ownership over claims is like medical claims, where people have gotten really jacked up.
Oh, yeah, I was going to ask that too. How common? I mean, you see all the bad stuff on the news where injuries happen in car accidents. How common is it for an independent adjuster to be assigned a claim that has injuries or fatalities, or?
Well, typically, if you are assigned to, if you do pull up a claim that has injuries or fatalities or something like that, typically it's going to be assigned to someone else.
Gotcha.
That's just been my experience.
Right.
And it's not that I'm incapable of handling it or incapable of empathy or anything. It's just, they would prefer their own people on it. Because typically with injuries and stuff like that, you're going to have lawyers. Yeah. And lawyers can get very nitpicky about what you said, what they said. And if the next question is how many times have you seen a lawyer pop up? Well, how many billboards do you see on the side of the road?
Exactly.
Happens every day.
True.
So
that's very true.
Staff versus IA in those situations with
Mm-hmm.
injuries. That makes sense.
Yeah. So we talk about the field when it comes to auto too, and we talk about workload. So again, we've talked about some other types of losses before, whether it be property and flood, how many you can do in a day. So I remember when I was doing it, we did a lot of drive-ins, right? Where, a hailstorm happened, cars would come to an old fire station or something like that, and they'd come in, you'd write an estimate, and it was literally like a drive-through.
Right.
So I know with those you can do more in a day, but if you're doing non-drive, so maybe it's a flood vehicle or something like that, a car that's not drivable, how many could you do in a day if you were just the average adjuster? I'm not talking about an expert. If you were just an average adjuster, how many could you do a day if they were all relatively close?
Okay, if they were relatively close, that was going to be the one thing I was going to say, because in my head, my first thought is how many can I fit within, maybe a few square miles.
Sure, yeah. How long does an inspection take? Maybe that's a better way of...
It depends on the extent of the damages. Some are going to be worse than others. Yeah. So some you're going to be able to write quicker than others as well.
Sure.
Like, for instance, if I go out to a car and I see it's a level 4 flood, that's a quick estimate to write. Right. Just one line, boom,
one
done.
line out the door. Yeah.
If it gets to a level 2, that's when it gets, a little bit more finicky. What brand vehicle is this? Yeah. How much electronics is in it? If it's a Tesla, you ain't touching it. You're not getting near it. But it's essentially, those are the kind of things that you have to look at. But for the average adjuster, let's say he's been on the job a few months, he's gotten into his groove. I would say maybe 8 or 9 a day. Yeah.
Okay.
Depending on how many cars that he's coming across that he's actually very familiar with.
So I have a question with that. When it comes to personal property that is in the automobile, I know property insurance typically covers that. What do you do as a on-site field auto adjuster when you come across a claim that there a lot of personal property damaged from the flood or from whatever? Do you take photos of that, provide it to the property insurance company, or you just kind of say, hey, that's out of my realm, we're not going to deal with that?
I would advise the person on site, like, hey, look, this is, because one of my jobs is, to be the insurance adjuster and let you know what's going on.
Yeah.
So I typically break any bad news that I have in person.
Yeah.
Reason for it is if you're on the phone, you're just, like they can feel like they can yell and scream at you all day. It's just a matter of fact thing. It's like they have a term for it online. I think it's just like almost the anonymous
Keyboard warrior.
Yeah, basically. Yeah, that's the word. Thank you.
Took me a minute.
Yours is better.
Yeah.
Anonymity.
But essentially, it that kind of kicks in the back of their head and they're yelling and screaming. Now, if I tell you in person, you might raise your voice a little bit and you might get visibly upset, but, you're not going to be screaming at me. So I typically tell them in person, 1, to go ahead and let them know right away. Yeah. And 2, just to make sure that, any of that can be just cut off at the pass and they're not thinking like, oh, this is going to be covered. And then this, surprise is sprung on them 2 days from now and they figure out it's not. But, that generally I would just say, hey, take pictures of it, just let them know that there was an auto claim, this happened, blah, 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 blah. And then this items were, and I would also tell them just make sure you're as accurate as possible. I remember one claim that I ran across where this guy said he had like $7,000 in petty cash and 2 high-end assault rifles in his car.
Why?
And it caught fire. And I'm like, for one, that just sounds suspicious.
Yeah.
Like, did you rob a bank?
Yeah.
Like, did you stick up a place? But for
you
2,
in Fast and Furious. Yeah.
Right. For 2, if that's not the case, why?
Why would you leave assault rifles in your car? A.
Yeah.
So with that being said, what are some ethical considerations that independent adjusters should keep in mind when handling auto claims?
Yeah. So, ethically, you never want to get mad at a claim or get mad at the person on the phone with you. You have to understand that they might be mad at the issue or mad at, X, Y, and Z. Not necessarily about you. Don't get angry at them. Don't yell at them. Don't scream at them. What I tend to do is I just listen. Sometimes, most of the time, people will talk themselves out. They'll, and you'll listen to them scream and you'll just be like, yeah, I understand. I'm here to help. And, at the end of it, they're like, look, I'm sorry. This isn't about you. So that's one thing that I always do. Another thing is you never want to work a claim with someone that you might know or that, you like, for instance, a family member or something like that.
That's a good point.
And that's mainly because, that insurance company might, go, well, hey, this person. Why are you working this claim?
Right.
Did you give him any special consideration?
Yeah.
Especially if it was a true large loss and you're like, hey, just being
absolutely.
honest here, but
like if you have mounds of cash in the car and there's assault rifles.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But yeah, stuff along those lines. You just want to make sure that you're doing the best job as possible, and making sure that that there's nothing that could be seen in a negative light towards you. That you're giving everyone the best that you can do, and avoiding the stuff that you really shouldn't be doing. Everybody should know that though.
Gotcha. Good question.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody, to another Fact or Fiction segment here on the New Adjuster Podcast. This segment is brought to you by Blue Leopard Agency, a marketing agency that's redefining success in the digital age. Visit blueleopardagency.com today to discover how they can tailor a marketing plan that's as unique as your brand. Don't wait. Take a step forward to redefining success in marketing right now. Kelsey, Fact or Fiction?
All right. Your car is covered during a nuclear disaster.
No, ma'am.
No.
So
It's fiction.
All right.
Think about this. You have a nuclear disaster in a major town or near a major town. How many cars are going to be affected?
All of them.
Nearly all of them. Right. So that insurance company would have to just literally wipe the board and give everybody what their car is worth at that time. And
get a new car. You get a new car.
And
That's right.
Yeah. So essentially, it's just not cost efficient for something like that.
Makes sense.
Good deal.
Yeah.
Good fact or fiction?
All right, so I'm going to ask that question. How's the compensation structure typically work for IAs in the auto industry? And what can you typically expect in terms of income potential?
So it really depends on what you're doing. So if you're out in the field and you're working, going out to these cars, or sitting in a tent somewhere, something along those lines, typically you're going to get, for one, you're going to be working a lot longer.
Sure.
As in terms of the days of the week.
Yeah.
Most of the time, if there's a disaster and you're being sent out to the area, you're working 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And those are 12-hour days. So if you're not used to that, I would get used to it real quick.
Yeah.
That's rough.
It is very rough.
But
and
it doesn't last forever.
No, it doesn't. It only lasts.
That's what you have to tell yourself.
Yeah, it lasts maybe a couple of months, at most, maybe, or
On a good day.
at
On a good
least.
deployment.
Usually, I've been on one that was like 4 months long, but it just really depends. You also get per diem while you're out there usually, but if you're in office, you're typically working maybe 6 days a week, sometimes 7, sometimes 5. It depends on what the insurance company wants you to
Right.
do. So, for the people who work in 7 days a week, typically it's going to be hourly, and it's going to be time and a half after 40. So
Nice.
you can do the math on that. It,
Yeah.
gets high pretty quick.
Sure.
And I think previously I've made like maybe $7K in a 2-week period.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that was just, me working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day. It was like, go. So,
So I take it that auto claims are not paid based on claims handled. It's based on an hourly. It's not paid per claim.
well, and the reason for it is, if it was paid per claim, then people might start missing things.
yeah.
Because the way I look at it is, if you're paid per claim for an auto claim, you're going to be wanting to get that auto claim out as quickly as possible.
I can get 30 done in a day.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And it's just like, well, great, but how quality are those 30?
How accurate
Like,
were
did you
those?
get everything done?
Right.
Is that customer happy? Like, those are the things that I would kind of look at. Like, sure, you can do 30 in a day, but if I'm looking back at your file notes, I'm looking back at this, looking back at that, and you're, it's just like, 1 or 2 words per thing, then I'm going to be like,
Yeah.
why should we pay you for
Right.
this?
We've talked about this before, and I always think quality over quantity.
Oh,
Hands down. That's,
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The way I like to see it.
100%. Yeah. So you've even done property adjusting as well, even a little bit in the office here at CNC, as well as being independent out in the field.
Absolutely.
Would you say that having experience on the other side of the fence, on the property and or the flood side, helps when it comes to auto, or is it just totally different to where it doesn't really match up?
I would say both help each other, especially if you're used to working in the systems for, a specific insurance company.
Okay.
So like, let's say insurance company A, they have a specific system for, their auto and their property side. Well, you're going to go through and you're going to be like, well, I'm already pretty familiar with this system, so I can, they kind of marry each other in a way where you're able to, zip through. When I had been working in auto, maybe like, I don't know, a couple years before I even touched some particular, property sides of things. But I was already familiar with that system.
Right.
So I was already 5 steps ahead of people who were just starting.
Brand new. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and that's where, I would always step in and be like, hey, look, I know, this is going on. Somebody might not be available to help you right away, but here's the, what you're looking for here.
Yeah. Makes sense. That's like we always talk about too on previous episodes about paying it forward. If you know something somebody else doesn't know, everybody had a first day, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Lean over to the person next to them and help them out and say, hey, you might want to do this, or you might want to take this step next in order to get that claim progressing or moving or whatever the case is. So yeah, that's a very good point.
I had an old adjuster, one of my first deployments, who I think his exact words were pay the people, close the claim. Is essentially what he told me. It was just like, you can't do that all the time, but it's a good motto to have in your mind.
Sure.
Pay the people, close the claim.
Yeah.
Close claim is a happy claim.
That's right. Makes everybody happy.
Happy
Exactly.
people are happy people.
So that's very true as well.
So, can you share any memorable or challenging experiences from your career as an auto adjuster?
Oh, that's a good one. So I got, I've had calls before where you don't know what to say. So like for instance, I was working total loss. And this lady called in asking about her car. And I said, well, in total loss, what we had to do is confirm options on the car before we, just make sure everything's correct. Everything's correct on your car. So we're paying you the right amount.
Right.
And, and there was a particular option in our seat. You know what a lumbar is.
Sure.
Lumbar support, right?
I need.
So I tell, right.
It's like
everybody,
all three of us lean back.
And, I asked her, I was like, well, ma'am, does your car have, lumbar support? What is lumbar? Okay. It's a medical term.
Sure.
I was like, we can work through this. Like your spine.
Yeah.
And she said, what is spine? And that's when I, had to stop and go, okay, like your back. And she goes, well, I'm just going to have you talk to my husband. And I'm like, at that point, I'm like, that is probably for the best. Because you can't say anything else to that.
Sure.
And then there was one other time where this lady called in and her car was missing. Tow shop said that they dropped it off at the shop. Shop saying they don't have it. So I said, ma'am, let me give you a call back. I'm going to get this worked out for you.
Right.
Because from what she told me on the phone, she had been hung up on 5 or 6 times that day by other people who just didn't know what to do. So
I have questions.
Yeah. That can be a very disconcerting experience too,
What questions do you have?
Was it stolen?
No.
Was it towed? For
it was
broken
towed, yes.
down?
What do you mean broken down? Like
Is
the
the
tow
car
truck
broken down?
No, so her car was in an accident. It was being taken from an accident scene. So essentially what happened was the tow truck driver had been drinking that night, got the call, went out to that car, took the car, said, I don't feel like taking this all the way to that place, dropped it off like in the bushes somewhere, and then left it there.
Did he not think you would be
found? Oh, no, because he reported the job completed, so the tow truck company wasn't really thinking about it. So it was just one of those things where, I had to, call that tow truck company and essentially go, look, that car's not there. You guys have it somewhere. You need to find it. And they were like, well, I don't. I'm like, you don't understand. You are now responsible for this car.
Right, yeah.
You're the one that took it away from the
last
scene.
one that saw it. Yeah.
So if it's just
do you
gone.
have proof of you dropping it off? I mean, I'm sure the shop had cameras and they were like, this tow truck never showed up with this vehicle.
Well, yeah. And, I even asked the shop to confirm. I was like, have you checked your back lot? Have you checked anywhere that you might store a vehicle? Anywhere along those lines. They said, it's nowhere. It is not here. And we are the only shop in this town with this name.
And can you think how upset that insured is thinking, A, I just got in a wreck so bad I could not drive my car from the scene, and B, my car is gone. It is missing. Oh, I would be in shambles.
Oh, when I gave her the call and let her know that the tow truck company finally figured out that the guy never delivered it and it was on the way to the shop that, at that point, she was very relieved. I can tell you that. She was, I think she was in tears because she thought her car had been stolen and that she couldn't get it fixed and that was the car that she needed for, all of this. So,
life.
Groceries. Yeah, life. Exactly.
That is definitely a memorable experience.
Yeah, I'd say so. Gosh.
All right. So when we talk about auto adjusting too, and again, this is for our audience's new adjusters, right? So what are some certifications, some training programs, things that they can do to get more acclimated to the world of auto adjusting? I mean, most people probably think, well, you need to be an expert in the build of vehicles. You need to know about it. But in reality, what do you need to get started?
I mean, general knowledge of vehicles helps.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that you have to be an expert by any means. Like you said, that's just if that was the case, there would not be as many adjusters as there are now.
Yeah.
But you might look into, I believe CCC has training programs on their website for, writing estimates and such like that. CNC also hosts a whole bunch of workshops and classes about writing hail claims and, for property and for auto.
Yep.
So, that's where I learned a good bit of stuff too, is coming to those classes, and, meeting people, shaking hands, and, going over, stuff like that. So, those are the resources I used, just kind of get I also watched YouTube videos about what the way something should be repaired.
Sure.
Because there's sometimes when a shop says, well, it has to be done this way.
Right.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, but they'll insist, and you'll just be like, look, I just reviewed this. It does not. So
yeah, I know. I used to come to the study halls they had here at CNC, and they would have them on weeknights and stuff like that. And I really looked forward to them because at the time I knew nothing about vehicles. I didn't know about the build of them. How does something get hail damage and things like that. But I think the more you get into it, the more classes you take, the more knowledge you gain, the more comfortable you get with it too.
Oh, absolutely.
And it's like anything else. Once you do it, then you get more and more comfortable. You gain that expertise and that knowledge as you go.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those things where, like if you just keep working at it, you're going to get it.
Right.
And, you have plenty of people here at CNC who are able to, answer questions and, push you in the right direction. Like I was a manager and a trainer. I promise you, if I don't know the answer, I know where to get it.
Yeah.
Somebody around here's got it.
Exactly.
I can remember being, I've started in property. I've said it already today, but not done much in auto. But I remember starting in property. I first got my license and I came to a class here, or it may have been somewhere off site with Paul. And I learned so much. I literally had 3 or 4 pages of a notebook filled up with info, just knowledge that I never even thought about.
Yep.
I learned that the back windshield is not a windshield; it's a windscreen, and that is right.
No, it's back glass.
Back glass.
What's the windscreen?
The windshield is the front of the vehicle because that's what actually shields the people from the wind. Then you have the back glass on the back of the vehicle.
What's the screen though?
Like a screen door?
Like a windscreen.
Windscreen.
Maybe I'm thinking what they call it.
Like a grill on the front of the vehicle, maybe?
We went off the rails.
So, are there any networking opportunities or industry associations that new independent adjusters should consider for advancing their careers?
I mean, I've seen quite a few social media groups online where a bunch of independent adjusters, get together and they discuss, what the different companies are doing and, what these different insurance companies are doing. Independent adjuster firms and, the insurance companies, what everybody's doing, what's going on with them and stuff along those lines. You can also come to we were talking about earlier, the CNC study halls. That's where I networked. That's where I talked to people. That's where I, really, looked people in the eye and said, hey, my name is Joel. I'm here to learn. And I'm like, if you give me, if you get me out here, I will do the work that you asked me to do.
Yeah.
And that, I believe that's what really kind of propelled me further forward because, I haven't wanted for work since.
Yeah, so. Look at you now.
I know.
Sometimes all you need is that opportunity.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I brought Joel up from downstairs. We're at CNC today, and I think he hugged about 20 people walking in the door. Yeah. So everybody knew his name, and that's something that you strive for as an adjuster, I feel like. The people here know you. You should get to know the people at these firms. Shake hands, talk to them, and that's just what you've done.
It's not always about work either. It's about actually getting to know people,
building relationships.
Exactly. Because I can walk in and just go, hey Murphy, how's it going? Every single day, but not know a dang thing about you.
Right.
So, and when it comes down to it, is that's not building a network. That's just building a stack of cards that are called acquaintances, and then at any moment it could just tip over and suddenly you got Jack.
Yeah. That's very true. That's very true. So what advice would you give to new adjusters? Again, that's our audience, new adjusters. So maybe not even specific to just auto, but what advice would you give to new adjusters? They just got their first opportunity. They're ready to get started. What would you tell that person if you could pull them aside for 5 minutes?
Work hard. It like this job, what I've learned, over my work ethic is the best thing that you can have. Be hungry for it. Come in every day wanting to get this stuff done. I understand. You might be tired. You might be, you might be exhausted some days. Yeah. But the thing about it is you have to push through. You have to be able to provide that level of, customer, service to people, as well as, being able to stop and go, well, and never, one thing I would say, don't admit that you don't know something to an insured. Right. Tell them, hey, I'm going to check on that. Yeah. And don't say, hey, I'm going to go speak to a manager. No.
Thank you.
No, do not do that. Because now, you know what you've just done? You've taken the authority out of your hands and you've passed it on to someone else.
You've lost that credibility now.
Correct. Yep. Now they're going to be thinking, well, I need to speak to that manager, not you.
What do you say instead of that?
I'm just going to have to review the policy and a couple of other resources real quick, and I will get right back to you.
Yes.
And essentially just let them know, look, like I'll review this, and most of the time that's what I am doing is reviewing the policy, or because the policy is a wealth of information.
Yeah.
Study it. Also review what states you're working in. Each
Yeah.
state has different jurisdictionals that apply to different things with cars. Like for instance, Kentucky has a different definition on what they consider safety class than like Tennessee.
Yeah.
So like side mirrors in Kentucky are necessary, like versus another state where they might not be.
Like motorcycle helmets are not illegal in Florida.
Correct.
Very
I
true.
did not know that for the
Very
longest
true.
time.
Very true.
So like and I bring up safety class because the reason for it is, and I think it's Kentucky. Somebody can correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, but essentially, if that side mirror is broken, they have to get a rental vehicle.
Yeah.
It cannot be driven according to Kentucky state law.
Yeah. Or even like total loss thresholds. I know that differs by state as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Texas runs off of the ACOR system.
Yeah.
Some states work off of 75% and some work off of just I think it's left up to the insurance company's discretion.
Yeah.
But if it's left up to the insurance company's discretion, usually defaults to 75%.
Yeah.
But just generally just come in, want to work, ask the questions that you need to ask, show that you're willing to put in the work, and show that you're willing to, not make waves for everyone else. Because when you make wave at at a independent adjusting firm, that wave doesn't just rock your ship.
Yeah.
Rocks all the ships on all, like in that general area around you. Everybody's feeling the motion of the ocean at that point.
Yeah.
Absolutely, because I'm just going to use calling in for an example. Your friend that sits next to you is taking all those claims that you were supposed to have. Their workload has doubled. The insured, they're not getting a call back when they need to. Not saying that that's rocking the boat, but it is. You agreed to a timeline of you coming in and doing this work, and it's important stuff. So.
Yeah, and I think the thing is too, people are depending on you, not just your manager, the IA firm, the carrier, but that policyholder is depending on you to get them back to where they were prior to that loss. So that's something it's a heavy weight to carry sometimes, but it's a burden that you should almost welcome, to feel like, hey, I am the person that can get them back to where they need to be. I can get them through this difficult time and get, them back to square one, to where they were before that loss. So.
Right. Yeah. I think the last thing I would say on it is just be there for the insured. Sometimes it's, you're being yelled at and you just need to listen. Sometimes they're sobbing their eyes out because they don't know how they're going to get to work tomorrow.
Right.
And, you just have to be there, listen, and try to be the best, person, the best adjuster that you can be for them. Offer them sympathy and, do what you need to do. And everything will get easier over time.
Yep.
At first, you're going to feel overwhelmed. You're going to feel like you're drowning. Take a deep breath. Concentrate on what you know. Do one thing at a time.
Yep.
Don't try to do 5 if you can't even do 1 right yet.
Yeah.
So take your time. Do one thing at a time. And then once you're able to, do that one thing quick, move to the next one, move to the next one, move to the next one.
Yeah.
Make yourself a checklist for claims.
Yeah.
Go through that checklist, every single claim, check on rental, check on, the estimate, check on this, check on that. Sooner or later, you won't even need that checklist. You can just, ignore the checklist and you're doing it all by muscle memory at this point.
Yeah, it'll become second nature to you.
Exactly.
Yep.
And at that point, maybe you can work another one or something along those lines.
Yeah.
But if you start screwing up, just go back to the first one. There's the, I can't stress this enough. Try to do one thing at a time.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a very, very good tip for new folks in any line of adjusting.
Any line. So I guess with that any line segue, I'm going to ask the question that I'm dying to know. Property or auto?
Oh, goodness. That is a hard question.
It is.
It depends on what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It really does depend. I think I enjoy training or managing more than anything.
Yeah.
And the reason for it is I've always kind of teaching people like this is what you need to do. And this is sure, it can be frustrating as all get out sometimes.
Yep.
But most of the time, just seeing them get it and seeing them become good adjusters and being able to get all this stuff done, it really, it makes my day sometimes.
When the light bulb goes off and you see it,
yes,
and
you're like,
that's
yes,
great.
Yeah, that makes me feel good when that happens.
Exactly. Yeah. So, but if I had to pick between the two,
drum roll.
Probably property, just because there's a certain freedom to it.
Yeah.
Sure. Especially when you're out in the field. Like, you know.
So would you say auto's best for beginners coming into
Absolutely.
This
That's the best place to cut your teeth.
I would agree.
Is auto. You learn, for one, if you're working, just some of the quicker sections of auto, you learn how to figure stuff out quick and get answers out quick. And you're learning, especially if you're in office, you learn how to speak to people, because that is a major thing.
Yeah.
Because one thing that they always pointed out to people who are working in these different sections is just watch what you say.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, if I'm on the phone with someone and they're like, well, I'm gonna do this and do that and do this and that, and I'm gonna say good luck. Well,
yeah.
Here's the thing. You may have the best of intentions.
Yeah.
You may actually mean good luck.
Yeah.
They did not take it that way.
Yeah, you don't know how somebody's going to take it.
Right.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
that's with anything nowadays. It's you gotta not only watch what you say, but your actions as well. Doing this job, making sure everything's documented correctly.
Right.
Coming from the carrier's point of view, everything, if it's not in the file, it didn't happen.
Right.
So, I think I didn't work in auto first. I worked in property first. But the more that I learn about auto, the more I see, it's easier learning the policy. It's a smaller policy than a big, large
Absolutely.
property
Yep.
policy.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yep.
maybe that is the way to go for the newbies out there.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Because they're
said.
not having to worry about, is the fence attached to the house?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think about it in terms of this. Ford Explorer, 5,000 square foot house. What's easier to look at?
Yeah.
To me, that Ford Explorer, it's smaller, right? Sure, you have to have some knowledge base and some expertise on vehicles, but for a brand new person, that's a lot less daunting than looking at that 5,000 square foot house. Yeah, that's kind of the way
true.
I looked at it when I started. I got into auto first, and I loved it, fell in love with it. That's what made me want to keep progressing throughout the world of adjusting, was the auto side when I got into it. And you talked about that too. So yeah, I think auto is a really good jumping off point for anybody trying to get into adjusting. I think it's a good place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. Once you get used to the constant just going of auto, you're pretty much you're geared to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily saying that as soon as you're doing really well in auto that you need to try to jump to property. You might need a little more time.
Sure.
Because you're getting things done quick in auto, but at the same time it's just like, okay, property's a whole different another animal.
Yeah.
You have to take certain certifications for certain companies, and you have to really review that policy. You have to know what kind of materials that you're using, or that the house is, and what the year of the house was built, or like what kind of skylights were it. I'm like, oh my gosh.
So, really and truly, auto deployments, they are, like you said, maybe a couple months long. You could get several opportunities for auto deployments, and then, your name's there. They're calling you for an auto deployment. And what if a hurricane hits and they're like, hey, are you interested in property? You want to come in and try this out?
Yeah.
That is when you dip your toe in, I feel like, personally. But
Yeah.
taking the auto deployments, yes, they're shorter, yes, they're
Yeah.
smaller, but it gets your foot in the door, and it gets your name on the radar of HR, of these managers, of other desk adjusters who will
Right.
recommend you because they worked with you on that last deployment. They know how good you were.
Right.
I think that's awesome.
I will say that some auto deployments do last longer than a few months, and that's if you're working daily claims.
Yes.
Okay.
So car accident, hit a deer, single car collision, total losses, stuff like that. Those can last. If the carrier is happy with the work you're doing, could be well over a year before you're out of that deployment.
Yeah.
There's been a few that I've been in a place for a very long time.
Good to know.
So
Yeah. So we talked about, basically Kelsey put you on the spot, right? Had to pick property or auto. Let's stick to just auto now. If you had to pick, would you rather do weather-related claims or daily, like collision losses, things like that?
Weather-related claims all day.
Okay.
Because you know exactly what's covered and what's not covered.
Gotcha. Okay. That makes sense.
And the reason I say weather over collision, there's just a different aspect to collision.
Yeah.
And the reason the first thing that it's going to be is subrogation.
Yep.
And who's at fault.
Yep. Yeah, you
It
got
can be
another party to deal with there.
Right.
Yeah.
It can be it can be very hard to determine who is at fault.
Yep.
One thing I used to do when I first started is I got little Hot Wheels, and I put them on my desk. And, I kind of, I would write on a sheet of paper what the road should look like. And then I would, kind of go about it that way and see, what this
That
person
is
should have been
smart.
seeing,
We need to
or
clip that. That's good.
what this person should have been seeing, or what this person should have been doing. And there's just things like that that you can do to kind of help yourself along when it comes to subrogation.
That is the coolest tip I think I have heard thus far.
I would have never thought about that.
No.
Well, I can't remember who. I know I picked it up. It wasn't my original idea. I won't claim it like that. I know I picked it up from someone. I just can't remember who. But in any case, that's one thing that you can do. Also, just a reminder that if there's two people in a parking lot, they're both backing out of a parking spot, and they hit each other, who's at fault? It's the first thing. Like, just go ahead.
I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah.
Is it a fact or fiction? No, I'm just kidding.
Tune in next week.
Is it the person who's moving? The person backing up isn't at fault, correct?
Oh, they're both backing up.
Oh, then they're both at fault. Neither are at fault.
No.
Everyone's
sure?
at fault. I don't know.
Put
that's
it in the comments.
And that's the hard part about subrogation. Now, you're correct. If someone was moving down the lane and the other person backed out, boom, that person who backed out, they had a reasonable, obligation to look while backing. That person is at fault. Absolutely. Right. Now, if they're both backing out, they both have a reasonable obligation to look while they are backing out of that space.
So they're both at fault.
It's not exactly 50-50. It depends who's further out of the space, and you have to get that kind of, I know.
I have almost done that before, so good to know.
It can become quite a headache, but once you get used to stuff like that, talking to people on the phone and, because you have to go over the facts of those cases with them. I literally talked to one person and I said, I just need the facts of the loss.
Right.
And, he started describing all this really crazy stuff that, and then this happened and then this happened. I'm like, sir, there's no indication like anywhere that any of this stuff happened. He said, you just told me to tell you what happened. You didn't say I had to tell you the truth. Oh, and I went, sir, I asked for the facts of loss. The facts.
Facts, not opinion.
And that's just another
fiction.
So at that point I had to pass them up to a the more critical departments
So in those situations where they're both backing up, do you check in cameras? Is that how you determine who was out further?
If they will give you cameras. Okay. Some Walmart places like that, they ain't gonna give you nothing. Because it's a security liability for them.
More and more people have dash cams. So.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that's true. And I honestly I would recommend getting a dash cam just for the
safety,
the fraudsters out there as well. The people, the swoop and squatters and stuff along those lines. And the amount of footage I've seen from dash cam cameras where the person is like, you can see that there's nothing in front of this car, but they just slam on the brakes,
right,
and then the boom right into them.
Yeah,
at that point, it's the other person's fault.
Yeah,
there's nothing that you should have been stopping for. You obviously wanted this to happen.
Yeah,
so.
Man, this was good stuff. I was telling everybody in our office today, yesterday, anybody that would listen, how excited we were about this episode. Because, like I said, we've dove really deep into property and flood and RDL this year and things like that. But this is the first time we've touched on auto adjusting. So I am really pleased on how today went. I thought it was fantastic. Joel, you were amazing.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
that was
like I said, when they said that you were the name that we were going to have for intro to auto adjusting,
we both were like high-fiving.
Yeah, we were both excited because obviously we'd worked together in the past. We knew you'd be a great guest. Obviously had a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge in auto adjusting. So again, cannot thank you enough for being here with us today. Hopefully we can have another auto podcast at some point down the road, or another auto episode on the podcast that we can talk about. So Kelsey, any closing thoughts from you?
That was so great. I learned so much today.
Well, I'm glad.
I did not know a lot of this beforehand. So this has been very enlightening, and I appreciate you being on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks again, Joel. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. We just finished up with Joel. Again, very awesome episode that we had today as we talked about auto adjusting. Before we go, we do want to do a Mythbuster segment. So, Kelsey, what is our Mythbuster for today?
So, if you are adjusting a flood loss and the water gets in the cab inside the vehicle, it's a total loss, right?
So that is a myth, or a common misconception. The reason why is if the vehicle, number one, say it's on, the vehicle's actually running and it gets driven into a puddle and water gets sucked up into that engine, a lot of times it can lock it up, and that can obviously cause a total loss. When you start talking about percentages of loss as it's related to the value of that vehicle, by that same token, if you've got a newer vehicle, just because water gets in the cab and touches the floorboards and gets the carpet wet, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a total loss vehicle. So that is a common myth or a misconception when it comes to auto adjusting, specifically on the flood side. Thank you again, everybody, for joining us today for Season 2 of the New Adjuster Podcast. Great episode. If you missed our last episode or any previous ones from Season 2 or back even into Season 1, go give them a watch or a listen wherever you get your podcasts. Obviously, like and subscribe as well. We're super thankful that you joined us this week, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
All right. Thanks, y'all.